Happy Friday, YouTube. Happy Friday, everyone. And please welcome back my regular guests, CoquiPirate.
It is good to be here.
And UJames1978.
Hello there, this is James UJames1978.
And it's great to have you both here. Now, my thoughts on the chase. Very enjoyable romp through time and space. I suppose that's the obvious and most obvious and laziest way of describing it. I enjoy it. I just wish it weren't such a jarring tonal change compared with the previous two Dalek serials. Koki, having seen the chase for the first time, what did you make of it?
Jarring tonal change is actually a good way to put it. I mean, well, one, the music, which I'm like, what? Two, was there like some sort of thing that they had to do, like, let's hire all of these random actors that I guess their careers died when television came out or something. I don't know. It almost seemed like charitable. I mean, I liked that, they had Abraham Lincoln and William Shakespeare and all that, but, the question is, like, why? Was that really just put there for the enjoyment? I mean, I don't know. It's just weird that they randomly included all of those people. And also when they were in New York, the Empire State Building, those accents. And that guy from Alabama who goes to New York thinking that he's encountered Hollywood. I don't think Americans would be that ignorant about American geography that they would think that Hollywood is in New York.
No, he said they're from Hollywood, so they're making a movie in New York, but he doesn't think Hollywood is all Hollywood is in New York.
Okay, and then he asks if they know other actors.
Yeah. Which
is something that people from smaller countries tend to do a lot when they speak to people from America. They think that we all know each other because they think the entire world is as small as their island. But I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, did you recognise that the actor who played the guy from Alabama also played another character later in the serial? Did you spot that?
Was he like one of the monsters?
No,
no.
He was.
He was the guy in the Mechanist?
That's right.
Yeah, Stephen. Yes, Peter Purvis plays both the hillbilly or hick, I don't know the right term, and also Stephen Taylor. I suppose one has a beard and he's not trying to sound American when he's Stephen. So I think they just really liked Peter Purvis and thought, okay, we'll have him back.
Those two accents, though, they were just what? But yeah.
Yes. Portrayals of American in 1960s Doctor Who aren't great. Unfortunately, that's not the end of it, but we'll leave that for now. The time-space visualizer is a weird thing, because once they had it, they thought, let's have fun with it. So let's have the Beatles. Actually, the annoying thing about the Beatles is, they were supposed to make a cameo, and John Lennon was a Doctor Who fan. And it was actually their agent who said it would be a bad idea for them to make a proper appearance. So they ended up having, although, because of Doctor Who, that clip of them in the chase is the only existing clip of them from Top of the Pops. So that's a bit of pop music history there, Doctor Who.
Classical music history.
Yeah, yes, and more of Vicky's future. I think the thing is that the time-space visualizer, apart from being a bit of fun, and there's a lot of silliness in that episode anyway. You've got Ian reading the book about monsters from outer space and calling it far-fetched. all that silliness and pointlessness, really, in the first episode. The time-space visualizer, which I don't think we see again after this serial. I'm not sure. I think it's just a Terry Nationism. Mind you, continuity for this one. They get food that seems to be from the food machine. The discontinuity is when the Doctor refers to having built the TARDIS. The way it's phrased, he could have meant something else, I suppose, but clearly he does mean. So Terry Nation wasn't clear on something. He thought the Doctor built the TARDIS. Time-space visualizer. The Doctor and co. could have been watching the Daleks as well the whole time. So they'd have known about the android and everything. They just had to stay tuned in and always know what the Daleks were planning.
Oh, something that confused me when they first saw the Daleks in the time-space visualizer. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you pick up the helicopter passing by.
No, it's fine.
Okay. But in any case, the Doctor said it could only pick up things that happened in the past, so they must be on their way. Did I mishear it?
No,
I think
that's correct.
That makes no sense then. How could he see something if it could only see what happened in the past?
Well, that's the thing. He could only see things that have happened.
Was it that they went to the past and that's when the Daleks got into the TARDIS, or?
No. If you remember the explanation of how the time-space visualizer works, photons, according to Terry Nation, this
light neutrons,
as he called them, I know, but he meant photons, pick up a recording, an encoding of anything that they reflect off of, anything that they interact with. So you are seeing a recording of something that happened. So these photons, these light neutrons, in inverted commas, are flying through the universe with the same information. All you have to do is tune in to the right recording of the right moments in history. So yes, they are watching something that happened in the past.
I think what Coqui's getting at is that if you're in the TARDIS.
Excuse me.
What do these terms mean?
Yes, I see now. I didn't add the TARDIS into the equation, but yes, it's wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, rational plot development for losers.
If we're talking plot developments, if they have to land and take off every once in a while for some reason, which is when they lose a couple of minutes, is it strictly necessary to leave the TARDIS and explore every time couldn't they just have landed and immediately took off again? Also, isn't the TARDIS more almost completely impenetrable and almost completely indestructible? So they could have just stay in the TARDIS until you've sorted everything out. I would have thought would be.
Yeah, I was wondering why they couldn't just fight from the TARDIS, or there are a lot of things that I was wondering about, like when they arrived in New York. If I were Ian and Barbara, I would have said, "Close enough. The Daleks are your problem now."
Oh yeah, good point.
We're getting off. But strangely enough, this is the episode, or rather the serial, that they do ultimately leave in. But I was thinking, they at least if I were them, I'd just be overjoyed. It's my time period, and I'd leave right then and there. But okay, they had another opportunity close enough, which considering their failure rate, it's kind of interesting that they'd have two hits so close. So the second one, was guided better.
One thing Coqui probably doesn't know, Alex, Terry Nation was forced to write this at the last minute on the back of a matchbox.
Yes, he had another 6-part serial planned, which for some reason they couldn't do. So this is his emergency set of 6 scripts, which, considering writing something in an emergency, serious deadline, and he knew how successful Daleks were, which while I how can I put this? On its own, I think the chase is a fun thing. I think it's very cool, enjoyable, even if it doesn't quite hold together. But it kind of insults the previous Dalek serial, because I really do love the Dalek Invasion of Earth. So it's kind of, but he didn't have the luxury. This isn't a guy who's got a couple of years to work on his next novel. This is, we need a script now. Because, of course, they were making Doctor Who 50 weeks of the year, which was a schedule that I think was killing everyone involved, to be honest.
I had thought that maybe they were taking parts of other scripts just because of, or, like they had planned some stuff, and they're like, we didn't get to use this one we wanted to, let's put it in here. Just because at the beginning, that whole thing with Vicky saying, I am completely redundant, it's kind of weird, given the last serial, she played such a huge role. I thought maybe they wanted to include that bit in the beginning of the last serial, but they couldn't fit it in or something like that. I don't know.
Yes, that is a possibility. That is a very good point.
Because it seemed like they were going to build up to it all falling on Vicky, which would have been great in the last arc. But in this one, it was just kind of like, what was the point of that?
What you've got to remember, though, Coqui, is that, yes, having been forced to scrap the original set of 6 scripts in which, yes, Ian and Barbara would leave, and also Vicky's story arc feeling redundant and so forth would have been explored further. Terry Nation literally had to copy-paste those sections of the scripts, those parts which were set in stone at that point, because yes, the actor's contract was up, so on and so forth, and then try and find new ways to string them together. Who knows what Terry Nation had planned for the time-space visualizer? There was a reason why the Doctor got it from the Space Museum, but no, now he just had to string together some fun clips with Abraham Lincoln, William Shakespeare, and the Beatles. We're looking into the past, but the TARDIS exists outside of time and space. As we all agree, the plot itself was a convoluted mess, but given the restrictions and the limitations, the fact that he had to reach point B via point J.
I think because this almost feels like a bit of don't know how can I put this? It's like a selection of favourites. You've got this sort of bits of history, bits of alien worlds, and what have you, and a House of Horrors as well. Which is by the way, on the subject of Iridius, and I do think they stay on Iridius a little bit too long. But talking of actors, though, there's a very young actor playing an Iridian who goes on to become quite famous. British audiences will know Hewell Bennett, who, for one thing, is in Neverwhere, which hopefully we'll do a podcast on at some point, because it also features Peter Capaldi. But yes, an unrecognisable Hewell Bennett as an Iridian. I'm not so keen on the Iridius part. I think probably out of all of it, I like Mechanus the best. I think the Dracula and Frankenstein androids are just a little bit too silly. And do I get started on the Mari Celeste, which, apart from anything, doesn't that basically mean that the Doctor and co are partly responsible for the deaths of the crew, leaving a moral question mark on the entire thing? But basically, Coqui, what would you say was your favourite segment or mini adventure of the chase?
Oh, I'd like, its conclusion that the Daleks encountered a bigger fish, which
Mm.
So those creatures, what were they called again?
Mechanoids.
The mechanoids. They don't appear again, which is kind of sad. I like that, the Daleks encountered, a bigger, badder enemy that could just kick their butts. Because that's how it should always be. No matter how hard someone is coming at you, there's always going to be someone bigger. There's always a bigger fish. But that's the thing. Like, this whole thing, you mentioned, like, the different areas. It seems as though they had a lot of different parts that they wanted to make into their own stories, and I don't know. That's the impression I got. Like, that whole first planet that I really didn't care about. I figured they might have originally planned for that to be an arc. The TARDIS going into the recesses of the human mind. That sounds like it could have been a great idea for a standalone episode, but no, they just turn around and apparently they're like super advanced androids that can beat the Daleks as Frankenstein and Dracula, which was cool. I mean, I wish robots were like that in our time period, but the point is they wrapped it up quickly because, again, it seems like this could have been an arc on its own, but they did sort of chop, paste. At least that's how the whole thing seemed, like bits and pieces of what might have been planned for complete script. That's not to say that... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's funny how the Doctor's theory was completely wrong for once.
Yeah.
But I think the thing with the androids was they were just amusement park androids, but because they were androids, they were, oddly enough, immune to Dalek firepower, and Dalek seems not to understand that they couldn't shoot these androids that they thought were human. It was like...
But didn't the Frankenstein one also, like, pick up a Dalek and, like, thrash it or something?
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so this is clearly a much more advanced android than anything we have in any...
Yeah. Well, I suppose they don't say when... they don't say when...
They do.
The amusement... Oh, they do?
At the very end, when we see the payment, the booth outside of the House of Horrors, it says the festival 1996 cancelled.
Oh! Okay. Well, 1996... Well, that's 20 years in the future, isn't it? So...
30.
No, 30 years. Sorry, 30 years in the future.
Well, that's a funny thought. In the year 1996, we have these kinds of robots.
Exactly. So far, there's a lot of that in 60s Who.
60s and 70s science fiction was basically how advanced we were all supposed to be living on the moon by the year 2000.
Yeah, exactly. So, James, your favourite outing from this adventure?
I'd have to say Mechanus, but I think that you're both being a bit too harsh on the first planet. Iridius, thank you. Because, yes, my biggest problem with the Iridian storyline, well, not necessarily a problem, almost kind of a wow, really moment, is that this is when you'd expect the Doctor to swoop in and save the day. This humanoid species that once lived at the bottom of the ocean is now being killed, slowly eradicated by Maya beasts. And instead of saving the day, as we would expect him to do, the Doctor and co just run off and leave them to die. Never go back to the planet again. Okay, maybe the Iridians do manage to seal off all the tunnels and kill all of the Maya beasts, starve them to death or crush them beneath tons of sand and rock, but we never find out, and the Doctor doesn't really have anything to do with it. Also, that was the arc which really showed the kind of Nazi mentality of the of the Daleks, the fact that they capture Iridians as slave labour to dig out the TARDIS, and once it's done, shall we let them go free? No, they are useless and inferior. Kill them.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of because I'd say that I had a wow what, but just because of how is corny the word. I'm just thinking, like, towards the beginning, Ian calls Vicky Christopher Columbus endearingly because she likes to explore. And then they go to the top of the hill, and it's just the cheapest looking set piece of, basically a wall painted like Doom. And that was my wow, really? They're looking out, it's like, I'd be a bit more concerned with the fact that I seem to have reached the end of the planet. But yeah.
Yes, 60s Doctor Who was cheap. Get over it. And, yes, basically, the third and fourth episodes, there is literally no reason for them to exist. We've talked in the past about how some serials are stretched out, how they could have been cut down to 4 episodes, 3 or even 2. In this case, it could have been cut down significantly. Everything with the time-space visualizer was just a convenient plot device. As you pointed out, well, why don't they just watch the Daleks all the time and know what they're doing? Well, that then Vicky wouldn't have had anything to do. Speaking of which, yes, at the very beginning, when the Doctor fixes the time-space visualizer, Vicky knows what it is, understands the principle, etc. And one of my favourite lines in the entire series, well, why didn't you tell me that's what it was, Doctor? I could have fixed it for you instead of letting you fiddle about with it. Again, just a reminder that although she is 15, she has much more intelligence, knowledge, and experience than Ian and Barbara put together. As a product of the time in which she grew up, obviously, but still, she's not a third wheel. And the fact that she was, again, the only reason for the House of Horrors episode to exist is for Vicky to get left behind, stow away aboard the Dalek TARDIS, and see the android Doctor being made, thus creating the suspense and the tension and trying to warn them, etc. But yes, Stephen Taylor, again, one of my favourite characters, probably my favourite moment, because yes, having been alone for 2 years, with nothing but machines for company, if you could even call it company. He portrayed that kind of insanity through isolation perfectly. Oh yes, and the final scene where they're trying to escape by lowering themselves down to the ground from 1,500 feet. Yes, you're on a platform 1,500 feet in the air, and the wind isn't blowing you off. It's just perfectly calm and still. No, that high up, it's not necessarily the jet stream, but it's going at a pretty high rate of knots.
Well, if it's Earth, we don't know about Mechanus.
Oh, of course, obviously. Well, if the air was that thin, they'd all choke to death. But no, never mind. The point where they're all lowering themselves down, planning to lower themselves, Vicky's saying, "I'm not very good with heights." No. As someone who is terrified of heights myself and literally screams with terror when they do the whole thing of Ian being just almost being on the edge. No, when I say I'm not very good with heights, I mean I would literally kill all of you and die a slow and painful death being tortured by Daleks before I go within 5 meters of that edge. Yeah, yes, I know it sounds, again, going back to what I was saying before about Stephen Taylor's isolation, insanity, for lack of a better term, his traumatic stress disorder caused by 2 years of isolation. They're lowering Vicky down to the ground. Literally, if it was me, you'd have to knock me unconscious first. And the place, the prison where he was in was on fire. Quick, hi-fi! The mascot, and almost drops Vicky. But, again, that's been his only companion for 2 years. The last scene of Stephen Taylor walking, dragging himself half alive through the man-eating fungus jungle, still clutching hi-fi.
Hi-Fi the panda, the original Wilson.
Yes. Wilson!
Yeah, I was reminded about that as well. And you're right, that was a pretty good job, much better than the Alabama performance.
Oh yes, Peter Purvis is an excellent actor. But,
it seemed like another one of those situations that's like, you need to come up and fight, which I guess is sort of a theme that's recurring in Doctor Who, because he was also pretty resigned.
Again, it's not necessarily that he was resigned. It's just he assumed there was no way out because he assumed that Doctor and Co had crashed as well. You have a spaceship. Is it serviceable? Then let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah. I just find it interesting that so many of the people that the Doctor encounters. It seems like all of the good people are almost always either too cowardly or too scatterbrained or something that, they can fight, but they need to just be helped in order to fight, which I find interesting that, it seems like a rather persistent theme.
Okay, to introduce another topic, an interesting bit of trivia, actually. Other than the fact that the mechanoids that Coqui brought up earlier as a fierce adversary to the Daleks, they were kind of thought up in case Dalek mania might one day fade. That they'd have another, could they repeat the success of Dalek mania and have mechanoid mania, I suppose. Although, as has been pointed out, we don't see them again, at least not in the canonical TV show. Daleks versus mechanoids would appear as a board game. I think I'm fairly sure it must have happened in comic books. It's been a few years. But actually, it was around this time that Terry Nation, the writer who owned the rights to, or invented the Daleks, owned the rights to them independently of Doctor Who, potentially, was going off to America trying to sell, I think the show was going to be called Empire of the Daleks, or Dalek Empire. But I think the premise was based around a war between the Daleks and the mechanoids. So in a way, what we saw at the end there was a precursor for a TV show that never was. I can't remember which US network, but they eventually decided not to make it. So there could have been an American sci-fi Dalek and mechanoid series, as distinct and set, well, Doctor Who might, as a result, have lost Daleks completely to this other show. But it's interesting to imagine it happening, and would it have been good? Was the network right to turn it down? So playing a kind of sci-fi series, alternative histories. CoquiPirate, what do you think of Terry Nation's idea of an American Dalek versus mechanoid TV show?
The mechanoids, while they are also rather corny looking, they look a million times better than even modern Daleks. Actually, that's the thing. In Classic Who, it seems as though they had other appendages besides the plunger. why they don't have two guns is beyond me. But at least you see them holding items and doing stuff besides the plunger. But the mechanoids, yeah, it's just like a big sort of orb thing, but well, that's the thing. Both of the robots, they're budget shows, and I'm not going to rip at it too much. But, the mechanoids is certainly something that I'd love to see. I wish there'd be more of that we can see evolve, see how their design changes, if they'd be like smaller levitating orbs, or if they'd add more appendages to the orbs, or I guess orb is the wrong word. It's kind of like an octagon, but it's three-dimensional shape, so I don't know the term. But
I don't know how many. I don't know how many sides a mechanoid has. Can I just be really pedantic and say, in the new series, the Daleks plunger morphs, if you remember. So it does. It's kind of multi-purpose, and I think you do see like a blowtorch Dalek to get through a door at one point. But James, your thoughts on this idea, Daleks versus mechanoids, the US TV show?
I can't really give an opinion on that until I've explored the whole distinction between the Daleks and the mechanoids. Why, if was originally intended, originally feared Dalek mania had worn off, the mechanoids and the other robots, which were designed ostensibly to replace the Daleks in the event that they ever became unpopular, would have both completely failed. The fact that, again, as we discuss every time that we discuss the Daleks, Terry Nation envisioned these as cybernetic Nazis. They were born out of the threat of the Nazi genocide, of nuclear holocaust, etc. They were not simply killing machines. They had a motive. They had a personality. They had a psyche. They represented the fear of that era. As I once discussed, I can't remember if it was in a podcast or just in a Skype chat between recording sessions. The only way to make the reason why the Daleks aren't scary today is that we no longer have the fear of mutually assured destruction. Genocide is now something that only happens in African countries. Who cares about people whose skin colour is darker than ours? But today it is the fear of terrorism. It is the fear that the person who lives next door to you could be a suicide bomber. So Doctor Who or any science fiction series, in order to recreate Dalek mania or something equivalent to it, would have to create a species, create a threat which encapsulated, which personified that fear of the terrorist cell, that fear of the suicide bomber, that fear that your neighbour could be your destruction. Going back to... just one minor point, Cokie. It wasn't that... If you watch the final battle sequence between the Daleks and the mechanoids, it wasn't that the mechanoids were superior, it's that the Daleks were outnumbered. If you actually count the number of mechanoids that are destroyed to number of Daleks killed, because they are cybernetic, there is... The Daleks themselves are organic, mutated beings inside this battle armor. If you actually count it up, far more mechanoids are killed. It's just if you see at the very end, the Daleks are utterly surrounded and outnumbered. Their superior firepower can't save them against that many mechanoids. But yes, this TV series. So then, this TV series, a representation of the threat of Nazi genocide, of mutually assured destruction against killer robots. That's why it was never made. Where can it go? What can it do? What is the mechanoid's motivation? You know, as I say, the Daleks are the personification of the fear of genocide, the fear of nuclear holocaust. So
we don't. The human colonists who are supposed to turn up to Mechanus, we never know if they actually ever do turn up, do we?
But still, again, then it wouldn't be the Daleks versus the Mechanoids. It would be Daleks versus humans using the Mechanoids as weapons. So again, it would be Doctor Who with more firepower.
I just remembered off the spot, like how in the first episode that they kept on saying, annihilate, annihilate, annihilate. And I'm like, something has gone horribly wrong. They're using the wrong word. But, you know, it seems as though they weren't, like, totally set on exterminate yet.
Yeah,
sometimes it was like, obliterate.
Yes, assassinate. Yes, it's like before I came up with my catchphrase, hello there, this is James Uscroft at UJames1978. People back on my old channel that years ago, what started back in 2009, used to go back and watch my old videos and say, you didn't do your opening catchphrase, because I hadn't decided on it yet. It hadn't become the norm yet.
The best catchphrase is... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've heard sitcom writers say you should never decide on your own catchphrases. You let the audience decide them. So there are some exceptions, like the IT crowd, you know, if you try turning it off and on again. But generally, it's things like Victor Meldrew's I don't believe it, which he actually didn't say that much. If you actually go back, he didn't say it that often.
I reversed the polarity of the neutron flow.
Yes, Doctor Who's supposed catchphrase, but we haven't come to that yet. Or at least the third Doctor's supposed catchphrase. But yeah, so I think exterminate was already in the public consciousness. It was the catchphrase of the Daleks, and eventually Terry Nation obeyed the public because they were convinced of it, you know.
Mm-hmm. But,
it's just one of those things. It's not necessarily even public opinion. Just after months or years of trying out different phrases, etc., exterminate just sounds better. Okay, we're hearing it now through 21st century ears. In a period in which Daleks not saying anything other than exterminate is strange and wrong. But yes, I think there is. It just has a better sound to it. It's just the best for a Dalek to say exterminate just suits the tone, the way that Daleks speak so well.
Sorry, Coach? Yeah.
Yeah, this is going into, I guess it's kind of deviating to somewhat related conversation topic. Just the whole idea that the modern fear is terrorism. I'm just thinking, because the biggest trend in like fantasy and sci-fi isn't so much some sort of shapeling, mind control enemy as much as it is zombies. And I'm just wondering if, what do zombies communicate about the fear? Is it the idea that our way of life is unsustainable, or go on?
There's been a lot of discussion on the internet as someone who once studied psychology, and I agree with that there's been a lot of analysis of this, and it's not that zombies are the enemy. It's the fact that as humans, although we are social creatures, we function best in groups of a maximum of 150. We can handle tribal communities. We can handle villages. but massive cosmopolitan cities with populations of millions, everyone becomes an obstacle. Dehumanizing your fellow man in order to get to work, in order to get to the shops, in order to get that last bag of crisps before somebody else does, becomes a survival tactic. We cease to view each other as humans, and as I say, view them as obstacles. And that's the thing with zombies. They're not enemies. They're obstacles is the only. They are flesh bags. They are punching bags. They are catharsis balls. They are things on which you can take out your rage and hatred. If you look, all zombie apocalypse fantasies revolve around run-of-the-mill, boring, ordinary people somehow. The society collapses, and now they are the survivors. They are the heroes of the wastelands. They are the lone warriors. It is they are rebuilding. They are reshaping civilization in their own image. So zombies, it's not about fear of society's collapse. Rather, it is the desire for society to collapse so that you can remake it. The problem being with this power fantasy, because that's precisely what it is, being able to have everything your own way and kill anyone who gets in your way without any moral consequences, without any twinges of conscience, is that the people who engage in such power fantasies longing for the zombie apocalypse would be committing suicide if the internet went down for more than a week.
Yeah. Actually, now I'm just reminded of The Walking Dead, how half the time the zombies appear as just sort of things in the background. You know, I guess you're right. They're not really enemies or things at all. They're just sort of there.
Exactly. It's that people want their small community where they are in power, where they are in charge, and just everyone else is just something that you can blow the head off in order to make yourself feel better.
Okay, well, I'd like finally to address the elephant in the room. Since we have seen the last of Ian and Barbara, the TARDIS crew, bar the First Doctor, of course, has all departed. Finally, Ian and Barbara got home, which we touched upon briefly earlier, of course. And there's so much to say about this. What did we think of them in their time in the... Well, I suppose basically they did 2 seasons. They did 2 years. Because there's only one more serial of season 2 left. Will we miss them? Where do we go from here? What do we think Ian and Barbara are up to these days? Well, one thing Coqui may not know is in the 50th anniversary special Day of the Doctor, where you see the Coal Hill sign, because of course it's the same school, it's still Coal Hill School. Clara works where Ian and Barbara used to. The sign on the front, it says, Chairman of the Governors, I, Chesterton. So there's some hints.
Oh, that's a nice fallback.
Uh-huh. So, yes. But obviously, Coqui, this is the first time, and you, of course, watching it, you didn't know that this was the serial where they left. So, what are your feelings about this? Were you shocked? Will you miss them?
You know, when they were in New York, I was already kind of emotionally prepared for them to leave on the spot. I'm surprised that they didn't. So I suppose it wasn't that much of a shock, huh?
Oh, okay. So you were kind of prepared for it.
But I just think that ending bit where it's like we can use the Dalek ship now, and the Doctor's reaction is like, darn, man, they've been stuck going around for 2 years. Like I've been trying. It's like, but can you imagine what it's like to, feel like you may never go home again? I don't know. It's just sort of like, And then they're back, and there's a chain of pictures. They're playing around with pigeons, and they live happily ever after. It's never really said if either of them had a spouse that would be worried sick about them.
Yeah, fan lore basically has always shipped Ian and Barbara together, even though they never say that they become a couple. It's people, you could talk to people and they would be convinced. Well, of course Ian and Barbara got together. I personally get that kind of impression from the end, and I thought their chemistry did change. The issue of did they have spouses and things, the thing is, right, so they conveniently get taken back 2 years after they left. That was the error margin of 2 years. Wouldn't it have been better just to pretend that they go back like the next day after they left? Because they'll have been missing persons, they'll have lost their jobs. What about their homes? Will people already have grieved for them? I mean, 2 years is quite a long time to disappear from the face of the earth.
Yeah, and again, this has always been my problem with that ending. They could have said 2 weeks, and oh God, we'll have to come up with a really good story. That would have been just as relevant. The only possible reason to make it 1965 instead of 1963, except for the fact that the audiences watching it would have been watching in 1965. So to give the feeling that yes, this has been 2 years, is so that they could make the joke that the fare on London buses had gone up from Threattons since 1963. That's it. Where have you been? The moon? Not quite, but you're getting close.
So at least they didn't have to cope with Susan's prediction coming true yet. It wasn't decimal yet. What? What do you mean? It's 100. So there's that. The Doctor's reaction, I suppose, the emotional story arc is he didn't like them. He didn't want them on the TARDIS. As far as he was concerned, they were stowaways. There were huge power conflicts and so on. And when it came down to it, he'd got used to them being around, and he didn't really want to say it. But I guess he's old. He's set in his ways. He already lost his granddaughter. He didn't want to say goodbye to them. Although, to be fair, didn't they say there was a 50% chance of death?
I do get the feeling that he was exaggerating. That he was deliberately being hyperbolic to try and compel them to stay. Because remember, the Daleks' TARDIS, it is a TARDIS. It is at the very least, an approximation of Time Lord technology. And even if it's more crude, it's infinitely more accurate. So there is absolutely no reason I can see, obviously, that it couldn't have gotten them home. It's just that they, as you say, even if they were enemies, they were familiar enemies. Though people don't like change. The whole thing that Coqui was talking about during the Space Museum serial, why won't you obey me, child? His granddaughter has grown up and gone away. Now he doesn't want Vicky to do the same. Oh, of course, the defining moments, the two... Oh, I can't believe we haven't mentioned this yet. This is going off the topic of Barbara and Susan, but we have to mention this. The Daleks marvelling over how identical their android looks to the actual Doctor, when the stunt double has absolutely nothing in common with the man and is at least 30 years younger. Oh, and also the fight scene where Ian and the real Doctor are wrestling. Come here, Susan. No, Ian, it's this one. Aha! The fatal slip that revealed the true identity.
Was this the first time that they've done that whole he's the imposter, no, I'm the real one sort of gag?
Yeah.
That's like, it was a new trope back then. It wasn't done to death like it is now.
Oh yes, that's the thing. In Doctor Who, certainly, in British science fiction, almost certainly, and there's a very good chance in American science fiction as well. Depends when the Twilight Zone would have first started.
That would have been contemporary. I think the Twilight Zone would have done some kind of doppelganger thing.
Yeah, but again, it wouldn't, as you say, Cokie, it wouldn't have been done to death as it is now.
This is the thing. These shows invented the cliches.
Exactly. But getting back to what you were saying about Ian and Barbara and shipping Alex, Cokie asking, well, it's never been asked whether either of them have a spouse. Never been stated whether either of them have a spouse. Yes, I just don't see it. Let's face it. Doctor Who fandom is intent on shipping the Doctor with the TARDIS. They'll ship the Daleks with Cybermen next. And yes, Ian was always playing the White Knight, rescuing Barbara, and Barbara was always almost getting raped every other serial.
Yeah, how can they replace Barbara? They've got to have somebody in continual sexual threat every week.
Unless, of course, they decide, hang on a minute, this is a bit creepy for Saturday tea time. This isn't exactly family viewing. Why don't we move on and do something else? And have the Doctor being accused of sabotage and of being the cause of the problem No, sorry.
To be honest, and this might be like ageism on my part, or like a perceived age, because I'm guessing that a lot of it has to do with Barbara's hairstyle more than anything. But I always saw Ian as a bit more of a swinging bachelor Captain Kirk type figure, because he basically has been Captain Kirk of the TARDIS, the daring young hero.
Less arrogant and annoying.
And Barbara I've always seen as a bit more of a mature, probably already married, maybe even has kids type character. But I guess that's just because I associate her hairstyle with old people.
Yeah, I think they're both meant to be around 30. That's from what I can recall. But I mean, I think she would have met a woman in that situation. If she were a wife and mother, it would have been mentioned in the past 2 years.
Exactly.
And then when she gets back, so there's so much jollity when they get back, instead of, fuck, has anyone actually already grieved for us? Has anybody already, how have we got to make it clear? Bearing in mind, sometimes it's boyfriends that are arrested when a woman goes missing. So it's sort of like, God, all the implications that are ignored of having been disappeared for 2 years, but
just to make a stupid, threatening joke. Come on. But again, I think this is another part of another aspect of it being written in the last minute on the back of a matchbook, and someone saying, "Oh no, it has to be 2 years, so it's contemporaneous with the audience."
No, I blame it on Moffat.
Yes, the 6-year-old Stephen Moffat. Damn him.
Exactly. An interesting point, of course, we didn't really discuss this. Again, it's not actually Ian and Barbara, but you mentioned these Daleks having essentially Time Lord, well, they haven't coined the term yet, but, TARDIS-type technology, which, these must be advanced future Daleks that I think have met the Doctor and co more often, met the Doctor more often than he's met them. And are very kind of acquainted with him, and how it ties in with later serials, I think we're going to have to, so I don't quite recall myself, but it is a bit of a jump. Daleks have gone from being trapped in one city to being an invasionary occupying force to having their own TARDISes.
Again, it's the whole question of timey-wimey. Yes, the fact, as you say, Alex, these are different Daleks from different time periods.
Yeah.
So on Skaro, the very, very end of their life, the very end of their existence, the last few Daleks struggling to survive in a city with the only source of static electricity being the floors. It's not inconceivable that they would have lost all of their power, technology, etc. The occupation force, not as technologically advanced, but much more numerous, much more militarily advanced, and also the advanced Daleks who retconning, because yes, there would have been no way of knowing at this point that the series would have continued for so long, for another 24 years, that yes, has presumably in the retcon, coming from the future, having met the Doctor multiple times, trying to go back and assassinate his earliest incarnation, a la Terminator.
Yes, of course. Yes, these Daleks could have encountered other Doctors, and yeah, there's so much to say on the subject of Daleks or Ian and Bob, but I'm going to open it up. So, Coqui, do you have any other thoughts to add?
Yes, my thoughts are Planet Mechanoid. That would have been a good show in its own right, just like a bunch of human survivors just completely overwhelmed by the mechanoids. Though Daleks also being stranded on the planet and having to flee from the mechanoids would be a nice little role reversal, because the mechanoids just all over the planet.
What were you saying during the recording break about Attack on Titan, and during the last Skype conversation about zombies? It's just the zombie trope with mechanoids instead of zombies or giants. It's
yeah, granted, that's just kind of the media that I'm used to. Maybe it wouldn't have done as well back then. But yes, Ian and Barbara, I will say that, the TARDIS without their, daring young adventurer does seem like it would be a bit of a shift, but at the same time, the Doctor has been filling that niche in all of Who. So, I don't know. I don't know if they are going to have, more companions, or if they're going to stick with the model of just those two, or... Because I could see it just being the Doctor and Vicky. I'm not particularly keen on that idea, just because I don't like Hartnell. I guess the acting in general, obviously, this was a different era that I have to sort of accustom to. Yeah.
What you're saying there, I do actually believe the reason they brought in Ian and Barbara in the first place would be that the whole grandfather-granddaughter dynamic would be somewhat lacking. But it would... if there was just conflict between Hartnell's Doctor and Vicky, if it was kind of the social... remembering the Space Museum, if it was the social revolution aspect of it, the teenager representing youth versus the Doctor representing the aging establishments, which of course was happening at that time.
Yeah.
Then there would have been some possibility to it, but then there's the then there's the question of how far could you take that. So
yeah,
and so again, struggling not to confirm or deny, say anything one way or the other. It's just such a sad shot of. Oh, but no, I won't mention that. So it's focusing exclusively on Ian and Barbara. I don't exactly, you know, a lot of people, oh, it's the saddest moment in Doctor Who history when Ian and Barbara leave because they were the first, etc., and oh, their romance. And I don't really feel it that much. It's possibly because I've seen the rest of Doctor Who, so there's so much else in the in the following series for me to like. But you know, there is nothing wrong with Ian and Barbara at all. However, it's the same thing you said about Amy and Rory leaving in New Who. The fact that their story arc was complete.
Yeah.
What, so are they honestly just going to continue travelling around with the Doctor for the rest of their lives? It's just not feasible. When a character's story arc ends, that is when they leave the series or regenerate, in the case of the Doctor himself.
Yes.
But
yeah.
You're going to say?
Oh, I'm curious, Coqui, is it just Hartnell's style of acting you're not keen on, or do you not like the character of the first Doctor?
I guess I don't like the first Doctor. I mean, he wasn't as annoying before he did the thing, which I don't get why he thought that was a good thing to do. But even before then, I guess he's not bad. I just don't see him holding the story, you know, with just his assistant or companion or whatever you want to call, you know,
So
Vicky.
The first Doctor with one companion, you think might be okay. Well, we have one more serial, and we will have completed the second ever series. Or should I use the American term season to avoid confusion? The second ever season of Doctor Who. And I'll say that the one that's coming up is a pretty good one. And so, without much further ado then, I'll go round. If Coqui, you could have your final thought and goodbye.
I hope his next companion is Captain Kirk. Have a good day. May the hamster prosperity rest upon your head.
And you, James?
It is only the beginning. Only the beginning. And may the great holy donkey bless your house for 7 generations.
Aha. Next episode, The Time Meddler.